Before we move on to the award ceremony, we have among us an entrepreneur whose journey has truly inspired several young entrepreneurs, giving shape to India's startup ecosystem. What started as an online bookstore in 2007 has today become country's most valuable tech startup, turning a small investment of $8,000 could be turned into a several billion-dollar business in just 11 years. Do you want to put your hands together for that part, ladies and gentlemen? And all of this, of course, happened because two people, they dreamed, they toiled, they rode their bikes in Bengaluru and delivered orders, innovated every single day, giving us Flipkart. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming on stage Binny Bansal, co-founder of Flipkart, to talk to us about his entrepreneurial journey for a fireside chat moderated by Anandita Ghosh, Mint Lounge editor. Welcome to the stage, Mr. Bansal.
Thank you for joining us here today, Binny. I feel people are always talking about how so-and-so person doesn't need an introduction, and then they go on to introduce the person for 10 minutes. So I feel for Binny Bansal in this room, certainly you do not need an introduction. So I'm actually going to jump straight to it. So tell us about your current venture, which is X to 10X, which is sort of like a startup school. You aren't providing funding, but you're giving guidance and kind of also a lot of tech guidance. Tell us what you do with X into 10X.
Yeah, so I'll basically talk about like why I sort of worked on this idea and started this project. So the Flipkart journey started in 2007. And at that time, there were very few startups in the ecosystem, tech startups in the ecosystem, and very few people to learn from a technology point of view. And throughout our journey, as we scaled from 1 to 10 to 1,000, 10,000, we faced different challenges. And the way we solved all those challenges was by making all the mistakes possible. So we, at Flipkart, I would have made like so many mistakes, which in hindsight, if you look, when I look at those in hindsight, some of them were so stupid.
Tell us about one, top mistake thing.
For example, when we were growing very, very rapidly in 2011, we had just grown very rapidly in the electronics category. And we thought that, okay, now that we have done books and then electronics, we can do it all. And in 2012, we decided to launch all other categories, like 5 new categories. And 2012 became a miserable year for us because we were just not able to manage the complexities of multiple categories, multiple different business lines. We were just not ready for that kind of complexity. And now looking back in hindsight at that, it's very clear that it was a pretty strategic mistake. We should have, again, gone step by step. But again, in hindsight, that was way more clear than at that time. So multiple things like those, whether it was in how do you manage, again, how do you manage your people, HR, as you're again scaling, because we were lucky enough to scale very fast, but managing that scale was always sort of 2 steps forward, one step back. So. And there was very few sort of, there were very few people that we could learn from. Right. And then as I began also investing in other startups, helping a few founders also through their journey, since 2012-13, I also started seeing similar problems, similar patterns just repeat. Like founders would ask, okay, how should I do this? How should I think about ESOPs? How should I think about performance management? How should we think about using the money we have raised in the most effective manner? So just very common questions about how to scale. And these were like some of the best startups, founders of some of the best startups of the country, having similar questions. So basically, that became the idea that why should everybody take 2 steps forward and 1 step back if you can, if running a startup is hard and if you end up making 100 mistakes while doing that, if we can help, sort of somebody can help you make to 80.
So what does it take, for a startup to interest Binny Bansal? As what are you really looking for? Are you looking always for the next Flipkart, or what are the, say the top 3 values that you are looking for when you decide to take somebody on for mentoring?
Oh, from a mentoring standpoint. So I think for me, what I look for, 2, 3 things. I think the core thing that I look for is whether what is the vision, whether the vision is to really change something fundamental in the space in which the startup is operating, or is it just an incremental sort of improvement in what is happening. And so that's very important. And then I think it's also very important for the founder to have really a long-term view on the business, on people, how is thinking about the leadership team and some of those intrinsics. And it has to be a large market. Right. So it should be a big enough problem. So I think if those things are in place, then I think it is quite interesting.
Right. Binny, you've also been investing very seriously and very widely. You invest in, I believe, more than 30 startups in very varied areas, from breast cancer awareness to electric bikes. Will you share with us, some of the really edgy, cool new businesses that you've invested in?
Yeah, I think it's hard to pick.
It's hard to pick your
favorites. Yeah, all of them are very edgy and promising.
Pick 3 really diverse ones.
Yeah,
maybe.
I'll probably talk about a few of them which are sort of a little more mature in their cycle and are breaking out. So there is this company called Grey Orange Robotics, which is into the robotic space for warehousing, robotics and automation. And they have this cool product where the robot goes and picks up an entire shelf of products and takes it to the packing station. So instead of people walking around the warehouse picking up different items and taking it to packing station, which is how it used to be, you have this whole robotic system automated, which is, depending on the order stream coming in, will pick up all these shelves, take it to the packing station, and where the packers can take out the products, start packing, and then the robot takes the whole thing back. And that's kind of the future of omni-channel and e-commerce warehousing, especially in the Western countries. So that's one pretty cool startup. The latest one that I invested in is a company called Rupeek, which is into the gold loans space. And it's kind of doing what Flipkart did in the retail space, using technology at the entire value chain of retail to really optimize and make it efficient. They're doing the same in the gold loan space. Gold loan is a huge market in India, and they are kind of doing what we did in that space.
Right. Okay, Binny, you've said in past interviews, when you look back or try to distill Flipkart's success, you've said that the 2 things that you think you did really right was the focus, which was initially on books, and the focus on tech also. So focus on kind of sector plus tech. Do you think that stands true for, say, startups that are starting out now? Do you think these 2 tenets stand true in general for any startup?
I think it's hard to generalize. I think every company is different. I think at Flipkart, if I really think about it, there were really 4 key pillars on which we took a very long-term view. So brand and customer experience, which drove the focus around only one category, which was books. So we thought that if we were to launch with multiple categories, again, the customer experience would suffer and the brand would suffer. So the focus on books was driven by that, a long-term view on the brand and customer experience. Then there was, again, a very long-term view on the technology, that we knew from day one that we are in the business of technology, because the only way to scale to millions of orders a day would be using technology in the entire value chain. And the third pillar, which I think evolved as we grew, was our talent. and talent pool. So I think one of the key factors for our success again was setting a very high bar for talent. So we would always optimize to hire people with the right fit and the right intrinsics versus just hiring people for speed.
And you continue to work with many of them now. Your colleague in the room here, the colleague with whom you started X to 10X is also a Flipkart colleague. So long,
and the
deep
fourth
bonds.
one was culture. That I think again we took a long sort of view on what the culture that we wanted to build and maintain. And I think those four for us made a lot of difference. I think some of them are relevant to all startups. And I think some of them might not be relevant, but I think as a startup evolves, I think all these four become relevant at some point or the other, for sure.
If you had the privilege of having something like a startup school, something like you're doing now, around the time that you were kind of just starting off with Flipkart, what's the one area that you think you could have really done, with guidance in?
I think that's a great question. I think the thing is not one area. So the area just changes every 18 months. So in the first phase, we were 2007 to 2009 only selling books. So it was just all about execution. And but then we started selling electronics, and the team became overnight became like from 50 people to 500 people. So it was basically. And we didn't, our systems, processes, policies were not meant to manage that kind of scale, people scale. So those became the challenges. And then we, as I said, launched too many categories. So just how to manage and do org design for a very complex business with multiple layers became the problem. So the problem kept changing every 18 months. And that's the sort of issue. I mean, starting up and scaling up company is super, super hard because the problem keeps changing. And as a founder, you need to keep evolving. So that's some of the thinking behind the program design and concept as well.
So what's the schedule like with the new businesses that you're working with? Do you handhold them from like an idea stage to, is it 18 months or is it a fixed period, or when you start to mentor a business, how does it work?
Honestly, I'm more involved on the concept and the ideation for X to 10X. The real work is done by Saike and Neeraj, who are both ex-Flipkart colleagues and sort of CEO and CEO of the company. So I get to do the cool stuff, so help them conceptualize, ideate, and also I meet a lot of Series B, C companies through the platform and mentor a few of them. Rupeek actually was one of the companies I was helping very closely and ended up investing in recently. So I think that's a lot of the work, but is done by my colleagues.
Right. So mentoring role is all fine. I'm sure everybody is, very interested in what will Binny Bansal do next. So what's next for you on, the individual front? What you're looking at?
I think right now I'm on I would say well-deserved vacation. 10, 11 years. I took a few vacations, but mentally, it's hard to switch off when you're in that role. So happily spending time, a lot of time with family, with the kids, and happily spending time with entrepreneurs. That's also like a vacation for me. So I think once I decide
on... with entrepreneurs is a vacation for you also?
Okay. I like helping founders like all the time. So that's again a hobby, I would say, for me. Apart from that, nothing decided yet. Still sort of thinking, exploring.
But your investments, that's still something you're actively doing. So I'm sure there are always new startups on the radar for you. Is there a specific sector that you're looking at? What are the sectors that are, currently heating up and attracting more investment, according to you?
So I'm actually very excited about the entire spectrum, right? The entire ecosystem. So when Flipkart started, there were like a handful of VCs. You could count them on your fingers, only early stage VCs, and handful of startups. But today there are like hundreds of companies starting up every year. Almost 100 raise more than sort of $5-10 million. A lot of companies over the last 2-3 years have become unicorns. So and in a lot of sectors. So I just see very exciting activity happening across sectors. And I think the breadth is what excites me more than any particular sector.
Right. No, with what is going down with Oyo, do you think VCs are looking more for kind of viable business models and real revenues rather than going for ideas? Do you think that's something that's changing in the startup ecosystem?
I think we should ask all the VCs in the room, maybe.
We will. There will be audience
reverse
questions.
audience question.
There will be audience questions, but I want to know what you think.
I can't speak for the VCs, but I think that's, at least the ones I know, always sort of have that as an important parameter for judging a company. So I think we keep going through cycles. You're kind of in a cycle where there is a lot of investment coming into the country, which is good. We went through this cycle in 2014, early 15 as well. So, I mean, I've seen this happen before, and then there are peaks and troughs. It happens all the time. So we are kind of in a peak phase right now, which is, I think, good for the ecosystem.
But what sectors particularly excite you? Would you say it's AI or pharma or research?
I think I'm pretty sector agnostic. I think technology has the power to change a lot of sectors over a long period of time. I don't think change will happen like anytime very quickly. It takes time. So I think I'm way more excited about hearing a story where the founders are able to create a business out of a technical insight or a market insight or a consumer insight, and have kind of done the proof of concept, shown sort of some traction in a small market, and have a vision to scale it. I think that is how I kind of look at things. I like to look at like different things. I don't like to box sort of my interest into sectors.
Right. So you've long been a Bangalore boy now, although you've been based in Singapore recently. You're on a break, and Bangalore has had this long-standing association with startups for a while. Are there other cities, other parts of India that you think right now are really throwing up interesting entrepreneurs and startups?
I think it's always been sort of Bangalore and then Delhi, Mumbai. Chennai has a lot of SaaS companies now, so I think Chennai has become a good hub for enterprise software companies. But I think it's Delhi, Mumbai, Pune, Chennai, Hyderabad. I think those are the cities where we see a lot more action.
Right. Binny, you've been pretty critical about the new, the rules and restrictions for e-commerce that have come up. A lot of them weren't around when you were doing Flipkart. I mean, so could you tell us a little more about what you think could be done, what's especially problematic?
I think the point I made, and I would reiterate at that time, was that there needs to be a lot of consistency in the policies that we have, because it's very important. It's hard to build and run a company, and if policy kind of is not clear or keeps changing, it's another challenge for the founder or the entrepreneur to overcome. So I think clarity and consistency is super important. So I would say critical about the changes or lack of clarity rather than any specific point. I think if there is consistency and clarity, I think the policy is okay. So that's the expectation I would have rather than any specific sort of policy.
I want to go back a bit to the Binny Bansal origin story. You've a colleague at Mint has written a book on Flipkart as well, which has some of this. But you've said, a lot's been written about how you didn't go for the McKinsey and Capital One interviews in campus. When you joined Amazon, it bored you. Google didn't hire you; they rejected you twice. And somewhere in that bored phase at Amazon is when Flipkart happened. So what's the importance of boredom, in the startup ecosystem? Do you need to give yourself these breaks and these lulls to really come up with a brilliant new idea? I feel maybe that's what you're doing now in this break.
Yeah, I think for me it works. So I don't know. I mean, I think every founder's story of why they started is probably different. So I think for Flipkart, it was probably very important because Sachin and I both were in the same team, in the same company, and really bored from not doing anything for 3-4 months. And that led us to ideate and think about if we could do something else, and that one thing led to another. And we ended up with e-commerce as the idea. So I think in our...
You were also flatmates at
Yeah,
that
we were
time.
also flatmates. So I think in our story, it was super important, and maybe in a few other stories as well, probably.
You've also said that one of your goals was to make Flipkart founder-proof. Now that seems like such a tricky thing to say. Isn't that kind of against the basic human drive to not become indispensable? How do you mean? Is that your goal for everything you build? You want to ultimately make it founder-proof?
Yeah, I think it goes back to like what are you trying to build? And so again, at Flipkart, we wanted the Flipkart brand to be sort of out there even if we were not involved. It was always about Flipkart rather than Sachin or Binny from the very beginning. So, and we kept on changing our roles internally. We basically were always thinking about doing what is best for Flipkart. And with that philosophy, it made sense also to think what will sort of happen if Sachin and Binny are not there. So I think the founder-proof sort of concept came from there, and it's worked out pretty well because even after the Walmart acquisition, Walmart is kind of running the company from a board governance level, but it's the local team which is running the business. So Kalyan on the Flipkart side and Sameer and Rahul on the PhonePe side are leading the business with all the other Flipkart local teams. So I think it's something which is working and something I'm very proud of.
On that note of deep wisdom and altruism, I want to throw it open to the audience. Do we have any audience questions? I feel people are, there's one hand up there at the back.
Yeah,
Yes,
I mean,
go ahead.
you've been an entrepreneur, now you're an investor. It's kind of sitting on both the sides of the table. And you rightly said that you're taking a break and you're chilling with your family. Going forward, you would want to just stay a fantastic investor, or would you take up in an entrepreneur seat?
I don't know. It could be either, but maybe more on, I think more on the mentoring or investing side than entrepreneurship, but we never say never.
A quick question, because you did an e-commerce of B2C, what do you think going to be the future for B2B e-commerce in India?
I think there's a lot of interesting stuff happening in the space, and still early days, but I think we will see 2 or 3 very large companies in the next 5 to 10 years coming out of the B2B commerce space as well.
Thank you. If there are no more questions, we're anyway running a bit over time, then we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much, Binny.
Thank you.
Thanks.